Welcome back to another edition of the Journey Midweek Connection. Today is Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Today, for our spiritual encouragement, I want to talk about one of the secrets to humility and walking in humility. For me, the secret to humility is having enough self-awareness to be able to admit that you have the ability to be wrong. And also, once you realize you're wrong, to be able to admit that out loud. You might have some people in your life who, for whatever reason, really hard to understand why, they just can't bring themselves to admit it when they make mistakes. And it creates all kinds of problems for them. Those kinds of people are hard to be close with because they won't join you in reality. And the reality is, we all make mistakes. We all have potential to be wrong. This Sunday, in our series called By Faith, we met Abraham for the first time. Abraham is an amazing guy. He made the pattern of his life stepping out in faith, which is why he's in the Faith Hall of Fame. But the brother was still human, and he made some pretty big mistakes over the course of his life as well. One of his worst days is recorded in Genesis 20. Abraham and his family had set up camp in Philistine territory in a place called Gerar, and the Philistine kings there, his name was Abimelech. When people would ask Abraham, while he was living in Gerar, who that pretty lady was, instead of saying, "That's my wife," he would say, "That's Sarah. She's my sister." And he did that because Sarah was very beautiful. He was feeling very vulnerable and insecure living in Gerar, and he's kind of lacking in faith at this moment, and he was afraid. He was afraid that the Philistine savages would kill him in order to take her to be their wife. Abimelech the king saw how beautiful she was, heard that it was just Abraham's sister, and so he sent for her, and then he took her into his house to be one of his wives, which created a pretty gigantic predicament because Abraham is to be the father of God's chosen people through Sarah. And right now, Sarah was in the house of Abimelech. We're seeing here how bad Abraham had messed up. Let's read it together. Genesis chapter 20, starting in verse 3. But God came to Abimelech one night in a dream and said to him, "You're as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. She's a married woman." Now Abimelech had not gone near her, so he said, "Lord, will you destroy an innocent nation? And did he not say to me, 'She's my sister'? And didn't she also say, 'He is my brother'? I've done this with a clear conscience and with clean hands." And then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know you did this with a clear conscience, which is why I kept you from sinning against me. That's why I did not let you touch her. Now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you will live. But if you will not return her, you may be sure that you and all who belong to you will die." Early the next morning, Abimelech summoned all of his officials. And I've highlighted that in my notes because he probably didn't sleep all night after that dream. And it was way before business hours started when he got all his officials together. And when he told all of them what had happened, they also were very afraid. And then Abimelech called Abraham in and said, "What have you done to us? How have I wronged you that you brought such great guilt upon me and my entire kingdom? You've done things that should never be done." And Abimelech asked Abraham, "What was your reason for doing this?" And Abraham replied, "I said to myself, there is surely no fear of God in this place, and they're going to kill me because of my wife." And let's pause right here. Abraham did something here that I think we do too much ourselves. He looked at Abimelech and he made a quick judgment about him, and he was completely wrong. Based on his insecurity and based on his pride, he surmised that Abimelech must have no fear of God. On a scale of 1 to 10, Abraham pegged Abimelech as a 0. He had no redeeming moral value as a person in Abraham's mind. And you know what? He was wrong. In fact, Abimelech did fear God, and not only that, Abimelech in this story acts with more integrity than Abraham did. It's a very sad and powerful scene when he asks Abraham, "What have I done to you that you would treat me this way, that you would put me in this position?" Abraham is guilty of something that I am guilty of more often than I'd like to admit. He made a judgment about someone, and he was dead wrong. When we think we can know a person's heart, we can quickly write them off, can't we? When we make an assumption based on a small sample size and maybe some hearsay, it's really easy to be wrong about somebody. I've been wrong many times in my life, and boy, does it keep me humble. I've misunderstood people's actions. I've misjudged their motives because I did some super fast math in my head and came to my own conclusions. And if you learn anything while you're going through school, that if you do math really fast, you end up making careless mistakes. And we come to these false conclusions about people. In my experience, two of the reasons why we misread our fellow human beings is our own personal insecurity and, of course, our own pride. We either project our fears onto others and we turn them into bad guys, or we puff ourselves up with pride and look down on others who aren't as spiritually mature as we are. We're like Abraham and just assume, well, there's no fear of God in that person. They're not very good at all. Insecurity and pride have caused me a lot of needless pain, stress, and missed opportunities with some really neat people. So I'm learning to be careful before I lay a verdict on someone. And the other thing is, God is always at work in people's lives. And so my verdict today on someone might not be God's final verdict on them. There's a pastor in town who did not make a great first impression on me from my view. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't good the first time I interacted with him. And then based on appearances, limited exposure, I made my own assumptions and I came up with a verdict for this person. Later, when I heard a rumor about things that he was saying from the pulpit, I assumed that it was true because it fit the narrative I already built about this guy. And then you know what I did? I had dinner with this guy. I heard his story. I felt his passion for God. I heard his testimony. I heard his passion for his people, and I was blown away. I came to know him who he truly was, and he was an awesome brother in Christ. We can easily be wrong about people. I think the biggest kicker for me is that a couple different times in my life, I made a snap judgment about someone, and then that person later on went and became one of my closest friends. Because our vision can be skewed by insecurity or completely blinded by pride, it's best in our dealings with one another to exercise a lot of humility, a lot of grace, and a lot of patience. We are called to love our neighbors as much as we love ourselves, and being able to admit that we can be wrong in our ability to judge who other people are is a great first step. And we need to approach all people with an attitude of humility. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.